For centuries, dropping anchor in public waters meant freedom. Now, in Florida and Georgia, that freedom has an expiration date, the 72-hour rule. Stay too long, and your safe harbor turns into a crime scene, complete with $500 fines and eviction orders, even if you are anchored in federal waters. Politicians call this protecting the coast, but maps show 80% of harbors quietly closed. If you think this cannot happen to you, think again. How did our right to rest on open water become illegal overnight? And who profits every time a cruiser gets kicked out? The first midnight knock is only the beginning. At 2:03 in the morning, a sharp knock rattles the hull. The sound carries across the water, louder than the wind and the slap of waves. A patrol boat sits in the darkness, blue lights flashing against the cabin windows. The officer does not shout, he reads from a clipboard. Name, registration, date of arrival. The cruiser fumbles for a logbook and points to the AIS track blinking on the chart plotter. Arrival 3 days ago, but the anchor never dragged and the boat never left. The officer hands over a citation. It lists Florida Statute 327.4109, violation of the anchoring limitation area. The fine is $250 for the first offense, $500 if it happens again. The form is stamped with the county seal, the words anchoring limitation area underlined in red. The cruiser asks, "Isn't this federal water?" The officer just taps the ordinance number and says, "You've reached the limit. Move at least 150 feet or leave the area." The word statute hangs heavy in the small boat light. The cruiser pleads, there is no safe harbor for miles and a storm is rolling in at dawn. It does not matter. The rules say 45 days, but the area is a patchwork of overlapping limits. Some zones are 10 days, some just 72 hours if you cross into city lines. The officer checks the GPS and confirms the anchor has not budged. "That's the problem," he says. "It's considered storage now." The fine is not the only threat. 3 tickets in 2 years and the boat is labeled derelict. That means seizure and possibly a criminal charge. The cruiser holds up proof, pump out receipts, a spotless logbook, AIS data showing every move. The officer glances at the paperwork but shrugs. "I don't make the rules." By sunrise, the cruiser is gone, forced to motor out in darkness and rising wind. The anchorage is empty except for the patrol boat. The ticket sits on the chart table, the ordinance number bold at the top. The promise of public water, broken by a midnight citation and a $500 threat. No warning, no hearing, just a knock and a fine for sleeping too long in a bay once open to all. The fear is no longer abstract. It has a time, a place, and a price. County commissioners gather in chambers with maps spread across the table, each colored with blue for open water and red for restriction. The conversation is not about navigation, it is about how to draw lines that keep certain boats away. Florida's anchoring limitation areas, ALAs, are not created by a single lawmaker in Tallahassee. They are born in county offices, where local governments file applications with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, FWC, asking for permission to carve out pieces of the public waterway. The rules are precise. No single ALA can be larger than 100 acres, and the total area covered by ALAs in any county cannot exceed 10% of its navigable waters. On paper, these limits look like safeguards. In practice, they offer a playbook for exclusion. A county identifies a stretch of shoreline, maybe a narrow creek lined with docks, or a bay popular with cruisers. Planners measure setbacks, 150 feet from every dock, sometimes 200 feet. If a waterway is 400 feet wide and there are docks on both sides, the math is simple and brutal. 2 setbacks of 200 feet leave nothing in the middle. The entire creek becomes off-limits, even though the law never says ban anchoring. The setback zones do the work quietly, erasing anchorages one calculation at a time. Once the county draws the boundaries, the application goes to FWC for approval. The commission reviews the maps, checks the acreage, and signs off if everything fits the statute. There is no public vote at the ramp, no hearing on the water. The process happens in offices with bureaucratic language and GIS overlays. When the approval comes, the county posts signs at the launch ramp and updates the local code. Overnight, a bay that was open for generations becomes an anchoring limitation area. The only notice is a red line on a digital map and a warning from Marine Patrol. The scale is hard to see until you look at the map. In some counties, the 10% cap means dozens of small ALAs scattered across the coastline. In others, a handful of large zones close off access to the safest anchorages. The effect is cumulative. Each new ALA chips away at the commons, shrinking the space where a sailor can drop the anchor without fear. In places like Hillsborough County, setback math and overlapping ALAs have rendered nearly 80% of traditional harbors unusable for anchoring. The numbers are buried in county records, but the reality is felt on the water. Fewer places to stop, more patrols, and a growing sense that public water is being redrawn for private interests. This is not a statewide ban. It is a county-by-county campaign carried out with applications, acreage caps, and setback calculations. The machinery of enforcement is quiet, but the outcome is unmistakable. The promise of open water is being measured, mapped, and parceled away, one anchoring limitation area at a time. The battle over anchoring rights in America's waterways did not start with a county ordinance or a state senator's pen. It is rooted in a centuries-old principle, the public trust doctrine. Under English common law and later in the United States, navigable waters and the lands beneath them are held by the state not for private gain, but as a trust for the people. This doctrine is older than any marina or mansion, older even than the country itself. In 1821, the New Jersey Supreme Court declared in Arnold v. Mundy that the tidal rivers and bays belong to the public. The United States Supreme Court followed in Martin v. Waddell-Slessie in 1842, again siding with the Commons. But the landmark came in 1892 when Illinois Central Railroad v. Illinois stopped a railroad from claiming the entire Chicago lakefront. The court ruled that the state could not hand over the bed of Lake Michigan to private interests because those waters had to remain open for navigation, fishing, and commerce. The bottom line is the public's right to use navigable waters is not a privilege granted by the state, but a duty the state must protect. Riparian rights, what waterfront property owners get, are something else entirely. They allow access to the water, the right to build a dock, maybe to fish or swim from your backyard. But they stop at the edge of the channel. No riparian deed gives the right to fence off a river or dictate who can anchor offshore. The navigable channel remains public, guaranteed by the same doctrine that blocks private takeover of the shoreline. This is not just legal theory. In Shively v. Bowlby, 1894, the Supreme Court confirmed that all submerged lands below the high water mark are held for the people, not the property owner. Even as states gained title to the seabed under the Submerged Lands Act of 1953, the federal government kept the final say over navigation, ensuring that no local law could shut the public out from waters meant for everyone. This is the foundation that every sailor, liveaboard, or weekend cruiser stands on when they drop anchor in a public bay. The law was designed to protect the commons from enclosure no matter how much money lines the shore. But over time, that trust has been tested by statutes, by local rules, and by the steady push of private interests. The doctrine remains, written into court decisions and state constitutions, but its meaning is now being twisted, its limits quietly redrawn. The stage is set for a new kind of battle, not over who owns the water, but over who gets to use it and for how long. Florida Senate Bill 1946 did not start as a weapon against sailors. The first draft was all about protecting the springs, those clear freshwater pools that feed the rivers and bays. Environmental groups cheered. No one wants to anchor over a manatee or tear up seagrass. But the ink was barely dry before the language changed. In committee rooms, amendments crept in. A few lines about residential areas appeared almost as an afterthought. Suddenly, the bill was not just about springs. It was about views, property values, and keeping boats out of sight from expensive backyards. The sponsor of Senate Bill 1946 stood at the podium and said, "We are just giving counties the tools they need to protect their waterfront communities." That was the public line. The real tool was the 150-foot setback. If you anchor within 150 feet of a dock or a seawall, you are breaking the law. The math is simple. Picture a creek that is 400 feet wide, lined with docks on both sides. Subtract 150 feet from each shore. What is left in the middle? Nothing. The entire waterway becomes off-limits, without ever saying no anchoring allowed. It is math, not debate, that does the banning. The amendment timeline tells the story. The original bill, filed in March, named a handful of springs and set strict rules to protect them. By April, the language expanded to include setbacks from residential structures, discretion for counties, and a process to apply for anchoring limitation areas. By May, the state gave counties the power to draw their own maps. No public vote, just a form sent to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Once approved, local code changes happen overnight. The result is anchorages that have been safe for generations vanish from the charts, replaced by legal no-go zones. Critics call it statute creep. A bill that started with manatees ends up protecting million-dollar views. The financial incentive is never spelled out in the text, but the effect is clear. Fewer places to anchor means more pressure to pay for a mooring or a slip. The setback weapon is quiet, almost invisible. Just a few numbers buried in a statute. But for the sailor looking for a place to sleep, it draws a hard line in the water. The mooring field arrives right on schedule. The same county that just closed the anchorage now offers a solution. 10 bright yellow balls, each chained to the bottom and spaced with military precision. The price is simple: $40 a night, every night, no exceptions. A cruiser who once anchored for free now pays $1,200 a month just to sleep in the same patch of water. Multiply that by 10 moorings, run the numbers for a year, and the town clears nearly $150,000. Money that once belonged to the commons is now routed straight into municipal coffers. Procurement documents show how the deal is structured. The Harbor Authority signs a contract with a private vendor to install and maintain the mooring balls. The town sets the nightly rate, collects the fees, and promises regular patrols to keep unauthorized boats out of the field. The revenue covers more than just buoys and chains. It funds new patrol boats, extra enforcement, and sometimes even the legal fees to defend the anchoring ban in court. Revenue is the engine. The timing is never a coincidence. The anchoring ban and the mooring field appear together in the same ordinance, often passed in a single meeting. The public hearing is brief, dominated by complaints about derelict boats and water quality. But the financial incentive is spelled out in budget notes, projected mooring revenue line by line, balancing deficits left by declining marina slips. The field is always full during high season, and if a storm rolls through, the waiting list grows longer. For the cruiser, the choice is clear. Pay the nightly toll or keep moving. The town has turned public water into a pay-to-play lot, using the law to sweep out anyone who cannot afford the fee. The profit motive is buried in procurement records and budget spreadsheets, but on the water it is as obvious as the price tag hanging from every mooring ball. The anchorage is gone, replaced by a floating cash register. The message from the Harbor Authority is blunt. Freedom on the water ends where the meter starts. Georgia lawmakers took the Florida playbook and rewrote it with a harder edge. House Bill 201 does more than draw lines on a map. It turns the act of anchoring into a regulated privilege. Any boat that drops anchor in Georgia's estuarine waters for more than a short stay is treated as vessel storage and is subject to a permit requirement. The language is clinical, but the effect is absolute. The law imposes a setback of 200 feet from every dock, marina, and shellfish bed. In a creek only 400 feet wide, 2 setbacks mean the waterway is closed to anchoring. There is no outright ban written, just a calculation that erases the anchorage without ever saying the word. The stated reason is environmental protection, oyster beds, water quality, and fears of sewage from boats. But every cruiser knows the numbers. Most liveaboards carry holding tanks and keep pump-out logs. Meanwhile, the waterfront estates along the same creeks often rely on septic systems that leak fertilizer and waste into the river after every storm. The law treats a floating home like a hazardous dump while ignoring the runoff from manicured lawns. In practice, House Bill 201 lets counties close entire estuaries to the public, all under the banner of ecology. The result is a permit regime that locks out working sailors and hands the water to those who already own the shore. Know the law, document your systems, and push back before the anchorage is gone. A cruiser who wants to stay free needs more than a love of the water. They need a defense plan. The first tool is movement. Federal navigation law recognizes innocent passage, so if you are transiting, you are protected. Do not linger beyond the posted limit. Keep your automatic identification system running and store your AIS track logs. These digital breadcrumbs are your alibi if a patrol boat questions your stay. Log every arrival and departure in a notebook and keep pump-out receipts handy to counter pollution accusations. If an officer boards or issues a ticket, ask for their badge number and record the time. Details matter when fighting a citation or challenging a derelict label. Know the boundaries. Download the latest maps of anchoring limitation areas from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission or your state's agency. Do not trust rumors, only the official charts count. If you are forced to move, document your route and take photos of posted signs. Join an advocacy group like the Seven Seas Cruising Association. They share updates, lobby lawmakers, and organize legal challenges. The rules are changing fast, but the right information and a tight paper trail can keep you one step ahead of the next midnight knock. The ocean may be shrinking, but knowledge is still power. Right now, every new setback zone and mooring mandate redraws the map of who belongs on public water. The right to rest at anchor, once protected by the public trust doctrine, is being whittled away creek by creek. If we accept shrinking freedom in silence, privatization becomes the new normal. The water is only free as long as we defend it. Drop your thoughts below and let your voice be counted.